Evening, everybody. So the hymns that we sing, they usually, most of them, I would say, they tell a story. And I think a lot of times the author's intent is to create this scene for us so we can better connect to the story that the song is telling us and allow us to better resonate with the message that the song is telling us by connecting it to many, many different scriptures. I would say that this hymn right here, this is number 397. We're going to sing it for the invitation song. This hymn definitely does that. So, and I think many of us would know this one. We sing it a lot here, actually. And so as we sing this song, we can picture this lighthouse, and I got this to help you out a little bit up here. We picture this lighthouse, and it's standing tall and strong on a rocky shore, and then there's this storm, and then there's this shore, and then there's this awful storm out there raging on the sea, and then one ship after another can be seen in the distance, and they're trying to find their way safely to the shore, and they're desperately looking for the lighthouse that is going to show them the way. And this is probably what y'all picture as you sing this song, maybe. The song was written way back in 1871, written by a guy named Philip Bliss. And he actually has at least 4 other songs completely attributed solely to him that we also sing as well. But as most other songwriters, he got his start very young. He started writing hymns at a young age. So, a lot of these guys that we're reading, the authors, they're I don't know what you call them, prodigies. I mean, they're really smart people. And Philip Bliss, as he grew up, he started traveling with certain preachers who were holding meetings, and he would just go in. He would be the song leader for that meeting. He would go around. Tragically, he died at age 38. Him and his wife were on the way to a meeting in a train, and the train wrecked and caught fire. And he escaped through the window, but he realized that his wife had not followed him out the window. And so when he went back in, they never made it back out. So he died at age 38, he and his wife. So he died much too early, but boy, I am thankful that he gave us such great songs that the church, that we can use to edify one another, remind ourselves of very, very important biblical truths. The song does that. Now, I asked in the email, when I sent the email out, I said, what do you think the song is about? And I tend to think that this is about evangelism, but a particular aspect of evangelism, and that is that Christians need to be the kind of welcoming, Christ-like example to the world that would make other people want to actually become a Christian and be a part of the Lord's church instead of running the other way. Right, so we are actually, and don't get me wrong when I'm saying this, but we have to draw people to us, so then they can draw closer to God. Like we're kind of like the middleman, so to speak. A lot of people don't know God, but they might know you, and so you get them, and then God can get them the rest of the way, if that makes sense. And so, but that can't happen if we aren't willing to be the example, number one, and if we are not willing to teach and share the gospel, talk about the Bible to people. And I know that is what scares folks, doesn't it? Does it scare you? I imagine that a lot of Christians, if they were forced to go and talk to someone about the Bible, about the gospel, I think maybe the thought of that would give them a panic attack and they would never make it there. And my prayer is that the next generation of Christians coming up, we're going to have less of those. We're going to have less panic attacks when it comes to thinking about sharing the gospel with people, because if we're not doing that, great day, what are we doing? I think the church has a lot more senders than they do goers right now. And I think we need both. We need both of them. We need senders and goers, but I am convinced that we need more goers than we do senders. Because the fact is, everyone who's willing to go, they're probably doing a lot of sending as well. And then you can get the best of both worlds with those. So what exactly does this song mean to you? What does it mean to people who sing this song, and what should it mean? Well, let's dive into it. Isaac said we're going to exegete the song. And they're like, okay, I guess, maybe, something like that. The first stanza says, brightly beams our Father's mercy from his lighthouse evermore, but to us he gives the keeping of the lights along the shore. So the song begins with the mention of God's mercy. A good way to start it. And probably this is a reference to 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 3, where God is called the Father of mercies. And you have many, many, many other verses. I'm going to give you a couple. Ephesians 2 and verse 4 tells us that God is rich in mercy. So if you could imagine God having this bank and it's full of mercy, well, it's that bank. You remember you watch DuckTales, watch DuckTales, and the old guy would jump on his pile of gold. Oh, yeah, there's just so much gold. You never run out of gold. God's heavenly bank is full of mercy and is not going to run out. And that leads us to Psalm 100 in verse 5. The Lord's mercy is everlasting. It goes on and on and on and on and on. He's got plenty to give, and he wants to give it. And then we have our responsibility as Christians, as his children, that stem from God's mercy. Jesus says, therefore, he's talking to the disciples, said, therefore be merciful. You be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful. That's Luke 6 and verse 36. That might remind us of 1 Peter. We're talking about 1 Peter on Wednesday night, and we're told to be holy, just as God is holy. It's 1 Peter 1 and verse 15, right? And so the fact that we are supposed to be merciful as God is merciful, that kind of leads into the second half of the stanza here. He says, but to us. So he's got the lighthouse taken care of. Don't worry about that. But to us, he gives. God doesn't give us mercy so we can hoard it. God doesn't give us comfort so we can hoard it. Instead, the Bible teaches that God comforts us so that we may be able to comfort other people. That's 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 4. And God didn't give us the gospel so we could just keep our salvation all to ourselves. Oh, it's all mine. It's not the way it works. Paul says that we have this treasure, that's the gospel, in earthen vessels. That's you and me. That's 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 6. And the gospel is a treasure. Do you look at it as a treasure? Did you find a treasure when you came across what you needed to do to be saved? It's a treasure unlike any other. It's a treasure that we obey. You don't really do that with physical treasures. It's a treasure that we're going to keep forever. You're not going to do that with physical treasures. And it's a treasure to be gained, to be shared. That's why you give it. Again, a treasure to be gained, to be shared. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket or bushel, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. It's Matthew 5, 14, 15, and 16. Do you know what was God's very first command? Let there be. That's his very first command. Let there be light. Well, why do you think that was? Maybe it's because you can't have life without it. And so Christians that make up the Lord's church, we are, folks, you as a Christian are a life bringer. I'm not trying to make your head swell or anything, but you're a life bringer. Now, we don't give the life. God does that, but he has put the way to that life in the hands of those who love him. And is that you? Christians are the stewards. We are the watchmen. We are the keepers. And if you've never viewed yourself as such, I think now would be a good time to start doing that. Here's the second stanza. Dark the night of sin has settled, loud the angry billows roar. Eager eyes are watching, longing for the lights along the shore. So now the song describes the other side of this lighthouse scene that is being painted in our minds. So we've got the heavenly mercy that God offers, and the comfort and the forgiveness of sins, and maybe you could think of a couple other things there. And then in the picture that we're supposed to see, there is precisely why God is offering it. And it's that dark an angry night of sin that is tossing around so many lives to and fro. I think there's a lot of people in the world who enjoy, now they wouldn't word it this way, but they enjoy sinning. They like it. They like their lifestyle. They know it's wrong, but they like it. They love their sinful lives. They like being trouble, and they like causing trouble. And they're fine with dying that way and leaving, going into eternity. They're fine. That's what they want to do. Isaiah 57, starting in verse 20, says, "But the wicked are like the troubled sea, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. There is no peace, says my God, for the wicked." And that's why the world is the way it is. And those people are in darkness right now, and they are going to stay in darkness right on into eternity. Then I really do believe that there are many, many other people who are lost, who don't like the life that they have. They want to get out of the troubled life that they're in. They can't stand it. And they're just waiting. They're looking for a way to get out. Have y'all ever read about the story of the USS Indianapolis? That it was a ship that was torpedoed by the Japanese in World War II in the Pacific. It's said to be the worst. If you look this up and you read the story, you've never heard of it, I'm just preparing you. It's not a very happy story. It's said to be the worst shark attack, not in U.S. history, in world history. Worst shark attack in history. So hundreds of sailors, I think there were maybe 1,100 plus sailors. When the ship wrecked, there was about 900 in the water, I think it was, and many of them died. I think they only rescued 300 or so. You have to check me on that. But a lot of them went by shark. They're sitting there, they're floating in the open ocean for 4 or 5 days, and they are literally getting picked off one by one by sharks. Unbelievable. Ocean whitetail. That's what kind of shark it was. But I read another story too, where there were 2 survivors who watched their 3 friends die horrible, horrible deaths as they all 5 of them tried to survive in a life raft after their boat sank in a very bad storm. And so I'm telling you these things because those people in those situations surely could not wait to get out of that situation. They couldn't stand it. You know that they were watching and longing for any sign of rescue and any sign of hope. And I think that there are people in this world who are in the same spiritual boat. They are longing for someone to come along and pull them out of that mess. They want a better life so bad. You've probably heard of other stories where people will head out on their boats, they don't really know what they're doing, maybe they're first time boat owners or something, and here comes a storm, and then they get in trouble, they get lost, and they need rescuing and things like that, and sometimes, they don't make it. I think that's the spiritual scene in life. I think a lot of times people have been fooled. They've been raised to think, well, I got this. And this is how I approach life. And they go out in the world and they don't really know what they're doing because they don't have God, they don't have Christ, they don't have the church as a foundation and as a shoulder to lean on. And then they find out, man, this world stinks, and I'm in trouble. I didn't know what I was doing. And so they're praying and they're seeking for some real change. And what they need is just to finally see the light of the church, that's us, to guide them to God's mercy. Here's the 3rd stanza. It says, "Trim your feeble lamp, my brother. Some poor sailor tempest tossed, trying now to make the harbor, in the darkness may be lost." I started looking, I never really noticed this, but what's the idea behind a feeble lamp? I was reading through this and I thought, well, who's he to tell me my lamp is feeble? Do you have a feeble lamp? Is that talking to you? Is this a shot at our faith? Are the lyrics assuming that we are slacking in us and in being the light that we're supposed to be, and that in our evangelistic efforts? I mean, it might be the case. Maybe the song is doing that, and maybe that is our position. Maybe we have been slacking. But I think at least another idea is there. So I think what it means is maybe that many of the Christians, they already view their lamp as feeble. They already think they have a feeble lamp. They're a really, really dim light. And they tell themselves that. They've convinced themselves that there's nothing really they can do. You know, I'm just one person. I can't do anything to change. I can't have an effect on anybody. And so they just don't try. And you know, if that's you, I want to tell you that you're thinking about it all wrong. Because that means all you're doing is putting your lamp under the bushel, your light under the bushel. You know, the song we sing, you're not supposed to do that. No. Relax, put it under a bushel. No, we're not supposed to do that. That's Matthew 5. And then if you're doing that, you're burying your talent in the ground because you're scared to death. Matthew 25. And Jesus said, you can't do either of those. You know, you never know what could happen until you try. Try to be the light. Try to bring someone to Christ. How do you know what's going to happen? You know, Peter would have never known that he could walk on water. Just like Jesus was doing that night. Had he not trusted in Christ telling him to come. Matthew 14:21. You know, Queen Esther, y'all know that story? She would have never saved her people had she not mustered up the courage to approach the king. And in her case, she knew that it was very possible that it wasn't going to work, that she could fail. Not only that, she could have lost her life. But she also knew that the other possibility was that she could succeed and do something great. And she did, all by herself. She literally changed history for her people. Amazing. There's a lesser known account in 2 Kings chapter 7. Now, in 2 Kings 7, there was a famine going on because of wars. These Syrians were attacking the northern kingdom of Israel. This is going on in Samaria. And there were 4 lepers that were hanging outside the city gate. And they knew they were going to die because they were starving, but they knew if they go into the city, well, there's no food there, they're going to die there. And if they knew they were to stay where they were going to die. They knew they were going to go out away from the city. Well, there was the enemy, and they're going to die there. And so they decided, you know what? Let's go to the enemy's camp and let's surrender ourselves. And if we become prisoners, then maybe they'll let us live. But then if they kill us, they say, quote, we shall only die. That's 2 Kings 7:4. And so here's the thing I want you to get from this. They decided to do something even when they did not know the outcome. You see. And so they did. And what they discovered when they went to the enemy camp, well, guess what? The enemy was nowhere to be found. They had all left. Verse 6 says the Lord had caused them to retreat. And when they retreated, they left all their food and all their supplies behind. So it turned out pretty good. They faced their worry head on, and they found out, God had already taken care of everything. And you don't think that could happen to you? Reaching out to somebody, fearing the worst. Trim your feeble lamp, my brother. Some poor sailor, tempest tossed, trying now to make the harbor in the darkness may be lost. I think it's an amazing thought that God has plans to providentially use you in bringing someone to the mercy and comfort and salvation of Christ. That's an amazing thought. But how would you ever know if you're hiding your lamp and you're keeping your light out of sight? You will never find out. So there's just the chorus left. It says, let the lower lights be burning. Send a gleam across the wave, some poor fainting, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save. What are the lower lights? Who knows what the lower lights are? Any lighthouse workers here? So the lower lights are something completely different than the lighthouse itself. We might even say that they're just a part of the lighthouse grounds. I guess that's the best way to put it. So lighthouses have one big main light. Sometimes they call it the beacon, the big boy. And that light is designed to help ships get a bearing on their location, where they're at, and to see how far away they are from the coastline. And then you got the lower lights. Big beam up here, and the lower lights. Now, not every lighthouse has them.
If the lower lights are burning, that means the sailors, there's no fog, nothing, they can see where how to get into the shore.
So I think you're spot on, my man. And not every lighthouse has them, because the lower lights are not always needed. It just depends upon where the lighthouse is, where along the coast you are, right? Now, modern lighthouses, we're so fancy nowadays. We got these nice, cool, fancy buoys and sector lights, they call them. But a lot of the older lighthouses, when there was a need for some extra guidance as the ship got closer to the land, getting through the hazardous areas or whatever, then the lower lights were used. And they would space them out along the coastline. And because of the separate lower lights that were placed along the shore, if there were reefs or rocks or shoals, jetties, whatever it was in the way, then the ship could avoid those and make it into the harbor safely. Okay, so those are the lower lights, pretty important. Now, the story behind the song goes that Mr. Bliss got the idea to write this song after he heard a sermon by a man named D.L. Moody. And Moody was telling the story of a ship, I think it was on the Great Lakes or something, and that was sailing into Cleveland Harbor, I think it is, during a storm at nighttime. And the captain had called out to the pilot saying, hey, I can see the main light of the lighthouse. I can see the lighthouse. He said, but where are the lower lights? And the pilot either radioed back or he called back and he said, they've gone out. The lower lights have gone out. And so the captain says, do you think we can still make it then? And the pilot said, we have to, or we're going to die out here. We're not going to make it through this storm. We're going to die. And so they tried to make it through the rocky channel into the harbor without the lower lights, but the ship crashed and every single person on board died. And Moody ended his sermon by saying, you see, the master is going to take care of the great lighthouse, but it is up to us to keep the lower lights burning. If you want to open your songbooks at 397, this picture is the Armen Lighthouse off the coast of Brittany, France. I didn't know this, I didn't use it for this reason, but the name Armen means the rock, which I thought, wow, that's pretty fitting for the title, for the subject here. So there's the Armen. What a crazy place to put a lighthouse, but I guess it's needed. This is the lighthouse during a storm. I don't know how well you can see that. This is the lighthouse during a bad storm. So look at that. It's the same one. Oh, come on now. There it is. Look at that thing. I thought, this is AI. This is a fake picture. As far as I know, it's not. And so forgive me if I'm wrong. I think that's real. Now, they automated this lighthouse in 1990, but before they did that, lighthouse keepers took shifts working there, and they manned the lighthouse for 30 days at a time. So you got to sit in that little thing for a whole month. I want you to imagine the courage that it must have taken to stay in this lighthouse knowing storms like that. Maybe even worse, just having to get a picture of that. The storms would rage like this. Where are you? That. And then imagine the amount of ships that would have wrecked and people who would have lost their lives had they not manned that lighthouse. But I can tell you that I would much rather so order my life with Christ so I can draw people to him and share the gospel with them than spend one night in that place. And the men that did that, they did it to save lives. You and I are supposed to be keeping the lower lights burning to save souls. And that's important. So God has given us great responsibilities because we are his children. But they're not so heavy that we can't bear them. And we can sing this song and mean it. What do you think? So the invitation is open. You need to respond to it. You need to obey the gospel. I hope you say something. If you need to repent and be restored, if you struggle with being the light that we have to be, maybe you just want us to pray about that for you. And we would do that. Maybe you need some encouragement. Give us the opportunity to do that. Let us know where you're struggling. We want to help. So if you need anything at all, I hope you come forward. Let's grab our songbooks. Let's sing it and mean it.